So we talked about placing an angle in the quadrants, and I talked about putting the initial side corresponding with the positive part of the x-axis. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the unit circle. So in the unit circle, the radius of that circle is equal to 1. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place that right triangle that we just talked about in 5.2, and I'm going to place it in the first quadrant so that I have a triangle drawn this way, where the hypotenuse is the radius of the circle, the x corresponding with the positive part of the x-axis, and then the y value. So now I would like to redefine each one of these trig functions. And remember, we have to have the trig functions of an angle. They don't stand by themselves without an angle. So I want to take a look at each one of these trig functions again. R is the radius, which is the hypotenuse of this triangle. X is the adjacent, and y is the opposite. So many times I like to look at trig more from x, y, and r rather than opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, because they're going to be more helpful or useful to you a little bit later. So we have the sine of theta is equal to y over r, the opposite over the hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, or x over r. And tangent is opposite over adjacent, or y over x. Then the reciprocal functions, cosecant is r over y, secant r over x, and tangent x over y. Okay, so you're given a point 2, -5. So we're going to sketch this right triangle in the proper quadrant. So the x value is 2, the y value is -5. So we're going to the right 2 and we're going down 5. And then we're sketching the right triangle in this way. We're always dropping a perpendicular from the point to the x-axis. We're never going to the y-axis. So we're going from the point to the x-axis and drawing in the right triangle. It has an x value of 2, a y value of -5, and the radius, it's not the unit circle, we need to find the radius of the circle, which is the hypotenuse of the right triangle. So I have 2 squared plus -5 squared equals the radius squared. 4 plus 25 equals r squared. R squared is 29. R equals the square root of 29. Secant is reciprocal of cosine, so we have the square root of 29 over 2. And cotangent is reciprocal of tangent, which is -2/5. So you have to first find the radius of the circle and then define them as sine is y over r, cosine x over r, tangent y over x, and then the reciprocals. And rationalize. Also, remember I told you in the different quadrants which trig functions were positive and negative. All of them are positive in the first quadrant. Now in the second quadrant, sine and its reciprocal cosecant are positive. Maybe we didn't do this actually. In the third quadrant, we have tangent and cotangent are positive. And in the fourth quadrant, cosine and secant are positive. So if you want to just think of all of them being positive, sine and its reciprocal, tangent and its reciprocal, and cosine in its reciprocal. And again, think of a way of memorizing which trig functions are positive or negative in which quadrant. You might make up some pneumatic device. All students take calculus. 4 words that would start here. All of them are positive. Then students, sine and its reciprocal cosecant, tangent, all students take calculus, tangent and its reciprocal, cosine and its reciprocal. And so that supports what we just got here. We got the cosine and the secant as being positive. The other 4 all are negative. Okay, now we have something called quadrantal angles, and they are such that the triangle collapses. We don't have a triangle. The terminal side coincides with the positive or negative part of the x-axis or the positive negative part of the y-axis. So when we have 180 degrees, which is also pi in radians, we can think about that unit circle that I was talking about a few minutes ago. And 180 degrees is here. That would be the theta, or the pi, in radians. And you think of the point on the unit circle such that the radius is equal to 1, and this has an x value of -1 and a y value of 0. So here's your x, y, and r values that you can find all 6 trig functions. So we have the sine is equal to y over r. So the sine is equal to the y value, which is 0, over 1 or 0. The cosine is equal to the x over the r. -1 over 1 is -1. The tangent is equal to y over x. 0 over -1 is 0. Now, the sine, the reciprocal of sine, which is r over y, is 1 over 0, and that's undefined. We can't have 0 in the denominator. The reciprocal of -1 is -1, and the reciprocal of 0 is undefined. Okay, let's review again, changing from degrees to radians. So I have 270 degrees times pi over 180. First of all, divide by 10, and then divide by 9, and we're getting 3 pi over 2. So just reviewing again how you can represent an angle in degrees and in radians. Starting with the initial side of the angle corresponding to the positive part of the x-axis, the angle is going to come around here to 270. That's theta. Again, the triangle collapses, but we can look at the unit circle. The radius is 1 of this unit circle. And then we want the coordinates of this point. So we have the point where x is equal to 0 and y is equal to -1. And the radius of the circle is 1. It's the unit circle. So we have the sine is y over r, or -1 over 1 is -1. The cosine is equal to x over r, 0 over 1 is 0. The tangent is equal to y over x, -1 over 0 is undefined. And then the reciprocals. The reciprocal of -1 is -1. The reciprocal of 0 is undefined. And the reciprocal of undefined is 0. Oh, I see a mistake here. This should be the cotangent.